And now to you.
Hey Dennis, my name is Ricky Belt. I'm 22 years old and I'm from Dallas, Texas. My question is in regards to a statement y'all put out the other day that said it's more important to know why God is necessary than to believe in the existence of God. That's quite puzzling to some of us in the Christian community, and sifting through the comments, I could tell there were some other people that were put off by that. So I was wondering if you could go a little more in depth about your reasoning for that.
I love it. I am convinced of that. I have been my whole life. I have devoted my life much more to arguing about the necessity of God than the existence of God. And I'll tell you one reason. I have a few, but I'll tell you one. People who believe in God, it means nothing. 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 I know nothing about you if I know you believe in God. You may be wonderful, you may be despicable, you may be an idiot, you may be profound. You have to admit that is true. You know nothing about a person if you know they believe in God. Hitler believed in God. Okay? Just for the record. He didn't believe in the God of the Bible, which is, by the way, that's pretty significant. So the first thing you should ask if somebody says, I believe in God, is which God? My first question is, did the God you believe in give the 10 commandments? If the God they believe in didn't give the 10 commandments, of what use is that God? If God didn't make his moral will known to us, of what use is that God? You know what that God is for most people, and what God is for most people? A celestial butler. Somebody in heaven who answers my requests. You might as well call God James. James, would you please send me a higher income? James, would you please heal my sickness? James, would you please? God is not a butler. God is a morally demanding, judging, loving God. Morally demanding means you can't be loving if you're not morally demanding. So I know nothing if I know you believe in God. Most people who believe in God, their belief, in my opinion, is worthless. It is morally inconsequential. What are the consequences of no belief in God? What are the consequences of there not being a God? That's important. Most religious people will not have an answer to the question, why is it so important to believe in God? They might say, well, a Christian, you use the Christian example, might say, well, you have to be saved. But even that's not enough, because you also have to believe in Jesus Christ to be saved by traditional Christian standards. So even God isn't enough for salvation. You also need Christ, correct? Is that fair? So for a Christian, the question is obvious. For a Jew, if I know you believe in God, but it's not the God who revealed his will, and at any time, it's not my God. It's not the God Jews believe in. And Jews gave the world the God that Christians believe in and Muslims believe in, theoretically. Theoretically in both cases, because not all Christians, not all Muslims, not all Jews believe in the same God by any means. So yeah, I'm adamant about that. I only talk to people. If they ask me, why do you believe in God? In other words, what are your arguments? After all, I'm an atheist. So, all right, I have great arguments for God's existence. Let's say I convince you God exists, okay? You're an atheist. You believe that the world made itself, which is an absurdity, literally an absurd belief. The world created itself, okay? Let's say you do, and I convince you, how could you believe the world made itself? Of course it was made. And you go, yeah, that's a good point. So what? How has that changed your life? Tell me in one way that has changed your life. The answer is it hasn't. Okay, there's a creator. Now what? Now what? That's my point. Now what? Now you need to know the consequences of why God is important. That matters. The fact that God exists has no effect on people if you don't know why God matters. So that line, which bugs a lot of people, and I fully get why it would, is really thought through on my part. My life has been devoted. I say this on my radio show, which is a regular radio show. It's not a religious show, But I'm one of the only, if not the only, talk show host who regularly has talked about religion, because it permeates my life, and it should permeate the Western world's life as it once did. But I always say the biggest single message of my life has been, what are the consequences of secularism? That is what people need to understand. If people understand, I'll tell you this, if people understand the terrible consequences of secular society, the death of meaning, the death of objective morality, just to give you two gigantic consequences, that is more important to me than they believe God exists. I'll tell you why. There are parents, for example, who, well, they're not terribly religious, they don't know if they believe in God, but they do understand the consequences of secularism. They'll send their kids to a religious school. They'll even take their kids to church. I want you to know the importance of God and religion more than I even want you to be certain there is a God, because that doesn't mean anything if you don't know why it's important. Does that make sense? Why is God important is a much more important question for religious people to offer their secular neighbors, friends, co-workers, and relatives than whether or not there is a God. Nothing changes until you understand how important God is. What's our timing?